Is donuts and like, I mean, so many industries get associated with like they grab a donut and a coffee on the way to the work. And like, and I think contractors can somewhat be that way. Like
It's
there's
gas
a stereotype.
It's
It's gas
food.
station food. Yeah, okay, that's what it is. I didn't have time to do something more significant than that. So you grab something, and what better than a donut?
Yeah. Or
is it
a slice
regional
of pizza.
specific? Like do you
I don't
get
know.
biscuits and gravy if you're in the deep south?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know what they have at gas stations.
Hey, I went to a gas station one time and got a slice of pizza, and it was terrible. It's like I was
going to say it was delicious.
No, it was, well, anyway, maybe I was at the wrong gas station.
I don't know.
It's like, what do you got there?
I know. My husband, when we're on road trips, I'm like, when you drive a long ways, it's like you have to stop at gas stations and get because you got to refuel.
Exactly.
And my family, we never like got snacks at gas stations. Like it was, we
traveling.
have a cooler in the back,
Okay,
and you can eat things out of the cooler. And I was always like, oh, I want the fun stuff though in the gas station. I want to overpay for things.
Please
and
take
so
my money.
now we do. We overpay for things on road trips because I guess it was
that
a
bag
lack
of chips that was 50 cents. So let's pay $4 for it.
It was a lack of, I guess, of my childhood.
Yeah.
And so now I let my kids buy stuff at gas stations. That's terrible.
We so do that too. We go on a road trip and Mary will go in there and be like, okay, let's get, whatever. The kids love it.
Yeah.
That's interesting though. Our kids get used to things.
Yes.
And then they'll probably like go the other direction.
Oh, I hope they do.
Yeah,
It'd
right.
be better.
Yeah, your grandkids will be like,
let's level it out here in the middle.
You're gonna have, grapes and whatever's in the cooler.
I know it's way better. Same thing with like amusement parks. Like we never ate at amusement parks.
Right.
It was always like
Bring a
we have a
sandwich.
bag, we have peanut butter and jelly, whatever it is.
We're not paying.
And now I'm like, I'm getting a skillet, sure, whatever. I'm like, we have Silver Dollar City here. Nobody else knows what that is, but it's
amusement
large.
park where they have all kinds of fun places to go,
delicious things
100%.
to eat, funnel cakes. I mean, like, I'll take.
But
it all.
nobody came to listen to the podcast hearing us jaw about this stuff. But we have some fun stuff to go over today.
Let's do it.
Yeah, marketing. I had a call with a friend, contractor. We had a great episode. We had fun with an episode. You guys tell us whether it's great or not. But we got some good feedback on it on the marketing side.
Yeah.
And today we thought let's dive into a little more specifics. Let's get it into the weeds a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think we hear a lot of times people say we don't need customers because we have really strong referrals, and it's a point of pride. I think I can identify that with being in that spot myself where you get a good name, people start referring their friends to you. And that may be true, but I think there's also an element of, do we have the right customer base? Do we have enough customers where if you really charged what you thought was appropriate for something and you lost a job, you still have enough deals in your pipeline. And then there's also, if you're starting off, you might not have anything in the pipeline. So maybe this is a mix of ground zero.
I think most of the people that I hear that say, and again, we think everybody listening to this is awesome. You are amazing. But everybody that we hear say,
there's a qualification.
Say that they
you're awesome, but
no, I guess that didn't come off right.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, we hear that term whenever people are like, I win every job too.
Yes.
Which like we want to debunk really in the fact that it's like you actually shouldn't be winning every job. I think is kind of like what you're saying too, is a lot of people who are like, I have more than enough work and I win every single job. And it hurts of course it hurts to lose a job because you just innate nature of wanting to win, I think. But debunking the fact that it's like, hey, your pipeline should actually be larger so that way you don't win every single job that you get referred to. And
I think that's referral-based businesses tend to lean towards winning every job because you're recommending your sister who is obviously you guys are close. You want to take care of her. You refer her to somebody that you trust, and she almost feels obligated to use the person you referred her to.
Right.
And there's kind of almost this, I'll give them a good deal because they're a referral kind of a thing. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with having a customer you want to work with and working with them.
Yeah.
But I think if you had more than just 2 or 3 people you needed to win in order to stay in business, then maybe it would change some. Yeah. Maybe you think of jobs as less personal and you have to win it and you have to close it in order to kind of get to the next point. It would maybe less pride involved of like, I have to win this job or that should be the stat you're after.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah. So if you don't have any customers, I think we could start there. Or you feel like work's drying up. I mean, sometimes we're beginning of the year. A lot of times people are just getting out of, holidays and maybe there's not as much work circulating around for you right now. And
you haven't gotten their tax returns yet. We haven't.
There you go. Yeah, right. So maybe things are a little slow for you right now.
Yep.
Or if you're new to business and you think about branding.
Yep.
We talked about this, like the truck wrap. I mean, we went through this again this morning.
Yeah.
Like it's a very specific thing. It wouldn't cost you necessarily a ton of money, but get that truck branded. And the temptation, I know a few guys have gone out there and like just got magnets, like go out there, go to Vistaprint, get a magnet for $20, slap that on the truck. But you're telling your customers that you are disposable too, like temporary. You can disappear.
Yeah.
You know, that magnet can come off the truck just as fast as it went on the truck.
Right.
So spend $500, spend $1,000, get your truck looking legit, and then that's a billboard that you're driving around everywhere.
Yeah, it evokes professionalism. And every single job you're at, you're probably going to get more neighbor referrals because they know who you are.
Yep.
Like if neighbors see you, I think we've mentioned this on other podcasts too. You know, we had a tree trimmer, an arborist, you know, that worked at our house, and like basically got all the business from our entire street after it because of branding, you know, and also they came and asked us, like they saw the trees out front, you know what I mean? It's a little different when you're doing interior work, maybe than exterior.
But would it have been different if that was just a blank white truck that showed up in the neighborhood where you're thinking, we don't know these people. Are they legit?
Yes.
Are they here to stay? Like there's a big part of trust involved with that truck being branded. It says that we're open to being reviewed. We're here to stay, that kind of thing.
Yeah. The latter example of that was, I've already mentioned this example in the past, but there was a neighbor was getting some painting done to the exterior of their house. And
this is a great story.
The vehicle was like missing hubcaps. It was, you know, it was pretty rough. Like the car was in pretty rough shape. Like I think the bumper was gone. I think that, you know what I mean? Things like that. And so it's like, it doesn't totally exude a lot of confidence in terms of like, will this person be sticking around? Do they have a sense of professionalism? You know, I could still see their work, but then in the back of my mind as a consumer, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know if they're going to be reliable or what, which is maybe wrong and that's judgmental. And I'm going to be, you know, slapped on the hand for even saying this, you know, but in the, you know, you have to put yourself in the customer's seat. Like if you don't have a sense of professionalism in what you're doing, which is branding, it's also how you treat people. And it's more than just that. It's the work you do.
And I think there's different standards. I mean, speaking more directly to, there's different standards that people have. You don't need to be driving around a 2025 pickup truck in order to,
for sure,
you know, to have a good name. Like if you can be driving around a 20-year-old vehicle, but just keeping it looking in good shape, having I mean, like there's ways of not having a vehicle falling apart without spending a ton of money. I mean, I grew up with my dad as a contractor who had like some vans that were run down when he first started off. But he kept them up, you know, everything ran well and all the rest. And he looked, I mean, and I think some people kind of shop off of that when they're price conscious as well. And so if you're trying to build a business that grows and has good margins, you're going to kind of really price yourself out of a certain clientele. And when you are that guy with the hubcaps missing, people say really the only thing this guy has going for him is the fact that he's going to be cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that guy's going to more likely to be taken advantage of because he comes in there and says, oh, well, I'm not sure about him, but he's probably cheap.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's literally, I think, the vetting process that I did. I was like, was he inexpensive? You know, I asked my neighbor that, you know. Yeah. Which is, not everybody wants cheap work either. Right. You know, there's levels of that, but yeah.
But yeah, you're getting yourself involved in those conversations where people say, well, is it $25 an hour? You come in here and do a bunch of work. And how many guys, I mean, so many people that are not contractors, but consumers are looking for that kind of like, who can they get in there for a good deal?
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, like going with the marketing side and the marketing theme of this podcast, you know, we've talked in previous episodes also about like first impressions. And like, I think that's a little bit of what we're saying too, is like your brand having a decent truck, having a truck wrap, having a website, having something, because even if you get a referral from someone, like they probably will do a little bit of like stalking, you know, like they will do a little bit of searching online to see like if you are legit. And people make impressions of people in like, I think it's like 7 seconds or 5 seconds or something like that. Like the initial impression is very hard to overcome. And so like thinking of marketing and branding as like, hey, this actually is your first impression to a potential customer. You don't get to talk to them first to have a first impression, like in today's world. Maybe back in the day, whenever you couldn't go find everything that you want to know about somebody online, but like they're going to look at your social media accounts. They're going to look to see if you have a website. They're going to look at your Google My Business. They're going to try to find what they can. They're going to try to look for reviews, things like that. And I know that scares some people, but like, man, it can really help build your brand and set you up with your best foot forward. If that looks professional, because it is a first impression.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're usually in a spot. I mean, most of the people listening are wanting to have a business that scales. They want to have good margins. They want to have a business that they're not, you know, serving. They want to have the business serving them.
Right.
You want to have, and I think a big part of that is the foundation that we're talking about today. In order to have that future where you can take the time off, where you have the margins, where you can pay for things and you can upgrade equipment and you have the ability to scale if you wanted to, if you wanted to hire people or you want to have margin in your life, this is a big part of this because you want to be working for the right customers. Otherwise you get in a rut. Those referrals are going to be the same people you work for, rinse and repeat over and over again. And so to really put yourself out there and set yourself apart, you're really saying who you are, to your point, Kenzie, of just being like, this is our business. And so people that can formulate those impressions and they do it so fast.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you're in a rut and you're not attracting the right customers, let's get the truck branded.
Yeah.
And some of that comes down to, okay, maybe we skipped a step because maybe you don't even have the graphics and imagery that you want to put on the vehicle. And I think so the people, to your point earlier, people listening to this podcast are awesome at their trade. Yeah. But most people are not graphics designers. They're not website designers. They're not marketing people. But they're people that are. Yeah. That do that type of thing. Yep. And the temptation, how many times do we hear just like my sister, it does websites sometimes. I've got a friend that does websites on the weekends. Yep. You don't want to hire that person.
It will never get done.
It'll never get done, and you won't be happy with it.
Right.
Exactly. It's not your son-in-law. It's not your friend that's going to help you get something done. Yeah. It's somebody that's a professional at it. And it's like any other business, you need to vet them. Have them show you their portfolio. Yep. Do you get a good feeling about, talking to them? Do you, it's a good relationship? I'm like, all of those things need to be true, right? Yeah. So go find 4 or 5 different marketing companies and say, here's what I need to get done, and have them educate you. Here's my objective. I want to grow my business, or I want to have the right quality, or I want to have quality leads. Yep. And see what they tell you. I mean, what would you add to that, Kenzie?
Yeah, well, I think you when we were talking about this earlier, it's not like I would go ask my neighbor to do drywall. Yes. Like that was the example that you had mentioned earlier of like, there are excellent, skilled people to do a specific thing. And it's okay. We all like work in this world together and we all have unique skills. And so I think in my like previous experiences, like at a marketing agency too, and so many times, like I would make recommendations and I'm like, hey, here's what I think we should do to really set you up best foot forward for success and branding and things like that. And then they're like, thank you. I'm going to now have my sister do it, or like to your point. Yeah. And then I look back like 2 years later and I'm like, I don't see anything different. Like, because again, it never happens. It's always the back burner thing. If it's a side project for someone, it will remain on the side. It will never
Maybe this speaks to a broader theme of things where if you can't fire somebody without any emotion whatsoever, you shouldn't hire them. Because it's and I don't mean that in a calloused way. Yeah. Because I love everybody I get to work with. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to fire them. But nonetheless, it's almost if there was something more than just if they were doing a terrible job. Yeah. I would want them to be somewhere else too, because there's something else they could do well, and it wouldn't be an emotional decision. They're not a family member where I feel a blood attachment to provide a livelihood to them. Yeah. It's like, if you do a great job here, I want you to really win, and there's a sense of in the sense of responsibility. Right. It's responsibility. It's not emotion. Yeah. And I think I think that's a thing where if you feel like I get somebody to work because I feel like I want them to be kind of like keep the money in the family kind of a thing. Yeah. And then suddenly you can't fire them. Yeah. You can't tell them, listen, you're not meeting my expectations.
Yeah, it's true. Which I'm thinking about our audience, and I'm like, there's probably a lot of family businesses, that we're talking to.
Man, I stepped right into that one. Well, I mean, I've worked with family. Yeah. And I think maybe to maybe walk that comment back a little bit too, I think when you're working with family, then you more or less you have a personal relationship and then you have a family relationship, because maybe where I'm off here is somebody could have a sister that's amazing at building websites and you want her to do it.
Sure. Yeah. And then that would be okay.
Right.
And pay her to do it.
And exactly.
Or like pay her for the service.
Where you feel confident that that's the person you want to have do it because they're an expert at it. Right. Not just because you want to help them get started.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. I think too, like an overarching thing with marketing, and we can get into like obviously more specifics and things like that, but an overarching theme that I've in connecting with construction businesses and things like that is like, if you do want to scale, and again, we've talked about you don't have to scale to be successful. Like it can just be you, and you can grow a business and you can be happy and you can go home and it can just be, you know what I mean? And you can wear all the hats if you want to. If you do want to scale though, you cannot brand your company on yourself. Yeah. Like you have to have, people have to be like, who do I call for this thing? It can't always be you if you want to actually scale and grow. And if you want redundancy in what you're building, if you don't want to be the person that's being called every night and every weekend and everything something comes up, then I think a brand is really a prerequisite, a brand logo, having an image, having a name that's maybe not you personally. So that way you can have redundancy and you can at some point exit the business if you want to. We've talked about that a lot of having, it's very, very difficult for any company to exit or sell or hand off the business if it's attached to just my name. It's Kinsey Batten Company. Like, who am I going to hand that to? There's not another Kinsey Batten. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think that's one thing of just like the long-term vision of a brand too. Yeah. Of like, it will help you in the short term, but it will also help you in the long term.
Yeah. I think the only maybe area where that could potentially work to have a brand centered around a person is when people kind of get the idea. There's a restaurant in Turks and Caicos called Mr. Grouper, and they did an interview with the chef Philip. Yep. And they started off. He's like, I'm Mr. Grouper. He's like, never mind, I'm Philip. But anyway, he built a brand that was more or less like a Mr. Fix It kind of an idea where but can he scale it? Well, it just depends on how good the next chef can cook,
and it depends on how good the brand is too.
Well, good point too. Yeah, but I think there's another larger element outside of this podcast of can you build a brand that where other people involved in it can actually fulfill as well as you can? Yeah. Because if Kinsey's the person I want to talk to every time, and it's like, and you hire somebody else, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to talk to them. Kinsey's the person I've always worked with. That's the person I want to do my job. Yeah. Then you try scaling that. It's a lot harder.
Right. And again, it's not a wrong strategy to do that, but it's just like if you want to scale, then there's a misalignment there, and there will have to be like some course correction.
Okay, let's come back to we could talk all day. We're having fun here. So number one, like if you don't have the brand defined, what is it you're trying to do? Yeah. One thing we've done before is there are lots of like people that can even help with that, bounce ideas off of different website domain name ideas, bouncing around friends or whatever, and say, hey, I've got these 5 ideas. Which one jumps out to you? Like, involve other people in the conversation. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, my wife and I'll do that on branding ideas too. She'll like, this is the idea of what I want to do, and what do you think the brand should be? And I'll like, what about this? What about that? Throw ideas out there.
It's almost like a little focus group, right? Of like, hey, don't be biased in how you present the options, but like ask for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
clearly, this is the only one to do. Yeah. What do you think of the other 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like,
so
you might as well not.
We have a brand. Yeah. Okay. Well, and a lot of our audience already has a brand. Run with it. Like, you don't have to. I mean, don't overthink it. Yep. Right. I mean, the logo part. You got a logo. You got a brand. Yep. Business cards are becoming less and less of a thing, but business cards are. Yeah. Probably have some sort of printed material where you can present to somebody, whether that's a trifold or business card or something like that. Something you can leave there. Yeah. And then you got your truck wrapped. You need a website. Yeah. So, and I think we kind of hinted at this already. Like, you don't hire somebody that doesn't know what they're doing there. But, a website does not have to be a $5,000 website.
No, it doesn't.
So, practically speaking, everyone thinks, okay, what do I need for a website? And it's kind of a little bit overwhelming, right? Because if you're not a website designer, you're thinking, and the first thing, if you go to the agency, they're saying, well, what do you want, right? Unless they're Kinsey, where you can actually coach them. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of times people feel the hesitancy because you're not a professional. You feel like, what questions should I be asking? Yeah. You feel overwhelmed. So find websites out there of your competitors or people that you respect that are doing similar things to what you're doing, and you're like, I like that website. Yes. And then you can kind of see distinctions between yourself and that business. Yep. Like, for instance, there's a big window company, Renewal by Andersen, and they're nationwide. Yep. And if you're doing windows, you would go to Renewal and say, okay, here's the things that they're doing. Here's, in contrast, what I do is a little bit more custom, a little bit more hands-on. Yep. We do higher end things, and you can kind of stack up against them in some respects. Not, you're not like us versus Renewal, but it's more or less your unique brand. For sure. But you can learn from competitors. I mean, these people have been around for a long time. Yeah. And know how to brand themselves. Yeah. I mean, they put lots of money behind it.
Yeah, way more resources than what most small businesses have, absolutely, because they're massive. Mm-hmm. I think the most successful like website projects is like what you're saying is when there are references and like what you like about them. You know what I mean? Because there is a component of design being like opinion. There's opinion in design. I like this versus you like this. Yeah. You know what I mean? This style, this look, this whatever. And so trying to convey that to whoever you're hiring to build a website is really, really important. And another thing that I would encourage everybody listening to do is, like you said, look at Renewal. Also look at competitors. Like, what are other competitors doing? Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to building websites. People have been building websites for a very, very long time. There's other service-based industries out there. You can look at how they're building their sites, things like that. And so I would try to just, before you hire somebody, get a little bit of that data, or make sure that that's part of their process, of like working with you to define, so that way, at the end of the day, if you did pay $2,000 to $5,000 to $20,000, I mean, you can pay as much as you want for a website as well. Right. So, and it depends on the scope of the website. How many pages do you want on your website? You know what I mean? That can all vary, how much that costs, similar to a scope of a project, of a construction project. And so that's one thing I would encourage doing, is like vet other brands, see what other people are doing, other brands that you like. It can be Apple, Apple's website, or if you like,
doesn't have to be construction necessarily.
Like just glean some insights into that, so that way at the end of the day you can feel like they can actually perform well in what you're asking for.
So one of the things people are going to think of in this is, when you approach an agency, a lot of times they're going to say, we're the designers, we design the website, we do the graphics, et cetera, but they want you to provide the content. And our audience, we're not content writers necessarily as an audience. Like construction, it's like build the website, you do the whole thing. Yeah. And it's a blocker to be able to get anything done, because they're saying, okay, what do you want that web page to say? Yeah. And if that's not your strength, there are some agencies that do that. Yeah. Or that's an area where you need to find somebody to actually say, okay, I need somebody to write the content for me. Yep. Now, there are some hacks with like ChatGPT and AI, things like that.
Which you hate, but I love.
Well,
no. I don't
it's
love
not quite that strong. Is it? I don't hate it and you don't love it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, I think it's a really, I think, there is AI, and that probably even hits people weird in this podcast too, because some people are like super anti-AI versus, what I mean?
AI essentially, let's break down, I mean, not to get too in the weeds, but AI, all it's doing is going out there and looking at content. Like this is a computer that's trained by humans to look at content that's been developed by other people and feed that into an algorithm that says, okay, you want to write something about your business. Well, how are other people doing similar things? Yeah. So it's going to sound like some other brand, but use language combined with all these sources and its understanding of English. And so you're going to have it say, spit me out an idea. You're going to tweak it. Like, it could be a useful starting place to come up with an idea, 100%. Like, you could tell ChatGPT, write me a one-page, summary about a construction business that does these services, and it'll do a decent job.
Right. Then edit it. Have somebody edit it.
Exactly.
It.
Right. Yeah. So there are shortcuts.
For sure. I think it's just a really great starting point. Yes. I guess that's the point. I don't love it in the sense of like finished product, but I do think it's a super excellent starting point for people who don't write content or grammar is not the strong suit of, you know what I mean? Things like that. And so
write me an outline would be the other thing too. Like if you are the person that likes the details, you could say, create an outline for me. And that way you have a starting place. And you could, even if it's wrong, you can say, well, at least
I'm not going to have that section or whatever.
Exactly. You can say, well, these are things we could do. It's ideas. Yeah. Ideas are hard.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think too, like before you even go into, I know this is kind of in the weeds on building a website, but one thing I would suggest is define, like figure out the content portion first before you design it, because otherwise you might have to spend more money if they have to redesign it.
Yeah, such a good point.
Later. If you hire an agency to just design a site, they're going to design a beautiful site. But what if the content, like sections of like what you actually want to say on the site are different than what the design allows? And so a lot of times the most successful website projects is like, hey, start with the content. Yeah. Start with, hey, how many pages do I want? The outline of the site, if you will. And then give that content to an agency or, whoever that may be, because that way they're going to be able to do it a lot faster as well. Because then they're not designing a site that's beautiful that you're like, yeah, it looks good, but it's not right because the content's not right, And then we get hung up on that piece. And they'll just be able to do it a lot faster, a lot less like, we don't call it change orders in the agency side, but basically a lot less change orders down the road if you have it all defined up front. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities to construction with building websites.
Yes. So. And a lot of times we get tied into the sitemap or the number of pages or labels of pages based off of what's typical. Like you have a home page, you have an about us page, you have a contact us page. Yep. And a lot of agencies or people developing websites are going to say, well, we have a 5-page website. Yep. And these typical 5 pages. So don't get hung up on that 5-page. True. In the sense you might need a 1-page website that goes through your services, has a contact us form or whatever. Like, that's less important than really conveying who you are, what you're about. I mean, you might have a nice, the about us page, you might get a little bit more creative with it and say, about your business and kind of introduce you, your crew, what you do, that kind of thing. Like, be authentic, be your brand. Don't be everybody else out there. And I think that's the businesses that I've, my first business that I started, I looked at all of the other things because I love selling and I love marketing and I love, creating impressions.
Mm-hmm.
And I created the wrong impression with the first business I started because I was bigger than what I was in my presence.
Sure.
And what that does is a certain level of expectations were created to my customers because I looked a lot bigger. And it was just me running a business. Well, what if I was just authentic and said, this is,
it's just me.
It's just me. This is what I do. This is my passion. This is what, you know what I mean? And that authenticity could sell as well. And then the way the expectations are appropriate, there's probably a little bit more grace involved where people say, this wasn't right, but I made it right.
Yeah.
There's a real danger of being like this very dogmatic type of like we're amazing, one of the best in the Midwest, highly rated, best in the South. It's like, well, why set those level of expectations if that's really not what you're trying to convey? Like you don't need to create false expectations in order to win.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true. I think it's a good point. I think another like part of a website too, which again could set up expectations that couldn't be fulfilled, is like, agencies or people who are building websites are going to use photos on your website, right?
Yes.
And one of the things, like I think places that people can either oversell their services or undersell their services is with the imagery that's actually used on the website. And so like if you have someone who's pulling stock photos, which are like not projects you've done, like not your actual work, that could very well be overselling the level of service that you can provide. So pay attention to the photos that are being chosen. And I also would steer away from, which iPhones take great photos now. Like you could probably get a pretty good photo for a website.
Yeah.
But that might even be a place where it's like, hey, if you really want to look professional and have before and after photos, have some of those things, because that really provides kind of that review side.
Yeah.
Without written reviews too, like
That's
before and after photos, things like that. So get in the habit of taking before and after photos. That can be shared on social media. That can be shared on your website. There's a lot of uses for that kind of content that I think is really valuable. So just as a little nugget there.
That's really good. Tying into that. Sorry, not teeing into it. My dad is a gifted designer, and I remember him telling me he wanted to update his website, and he had all of these iPhone photos and just random photos. None of it was stylistically the same at all. It was just a random smattering of different angles, different zoom levels. Everything was just, and it looked very tacky. Because they weren't designed to be marketing photos. They were just designed to capture the progress as it went. Now, they can be good for social media and some things like that, right? But from a standpoint of like your portfolio,
right?
I told him, I said, hire somebody that's a good at that. So he hired just the cousin and those kinds of like the family member to do something or somebody, because my dad's a caring person. He wants to like this person, we can get to help them get started. And best thing he did was hire a real estate photographer.
Yeah, it's amazing.
For like $200 or $300 a project.
Yep.
And he has amazing. I mean, like his quality of work suddenly looks better.
Yeah.
Because I look at his website and say, wow, look at that job. It's impressive.
And I think the thing to that is like when I hear like $200, $300, $600, depends on the photographer, obviously the cost there. But it's like, if you know what your costs are, that is a business expense.
Yes.
Or it's a marketing expense.
It will pay for itself.
You know what I mean? Like it will. And it's also like, I think there's a tendency of like, man, it's another $300. Like I'm just losing that money. But it's like, if you know what your overhead is,
it's an investment.
It's an investment and it's a marketing expense. And so it's like, that should be covered in your jobs moving forward. Like that cost should be.
Yeah, it's part of your overhead.
Exactly. Yep. So I think just tying back to the financial piece of that, like your marketing expenses is part of your business expenses.
Yeah.
Like finding a domain. And I know we're saying the actual words, but it's like for people who are not familiar with domain or sitemap or, some of those kinds of things, I know that can kind of be over your head or over people's head because it's very specific. A domain is the URL that you're using for your business. You know what I mean?
.com.
One thing, yes.
Or whatever.
Exactly.
.whatever.
.co. Whatever, right. One thing I would suggest for everyone listening is do not let an agency or someone else purchase your domain.
Yeah.
Your URL. So go to websites like GoDaddy. There's a ton of other, a lot of others as well.
Namecheap. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Namecheap. You can buy a domain for $15 a year.
Yep.
If it's not,
and
if someone else doesn't
it's
own
your
it.
property.
Yeah,
yep.
It's your property. And then that way, if you build a website with an agency and you have to move away from them, you own your website.
Yep.
It's not like jumping through hurdles to actually get a website.
This is such good advice.
So that's something that like, do not let anybody else buy your domain.
Yep.
Use your own credit card.
Yep.
Use your own account. Sign up for an account to purchase your domain so that way you can take your property. Like if somebody else needs to manage it or that agency goes under or that person isn't doing websites anymore, you can take that property and actually go moving forward.
It's good. Okay, so we have a logo, we have our truck wrapped, we have a website. we're kind of, and just from those angles, now we're saying, okay, at that point, now obviously we're getting stuff from our driving billboard, but the website, we're saying, well, we want to generate more traffic, we want to engage with people. So now we talk about search engine optimization or paid ads or social media. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of trails we can go down on this side. Search engine optimization, again, another marketing language term, which it feels overwhelming to people who are like, I'm not familiar with search engine optimization. And so really what that means is, hey, we want to rank better, show higher when someone is looking for the service that you provide.
You go to Google, you want to be the top results.
Yeah. If you do drywall, I want to show up first in Springfield, Missouri for drywall, or whatever the city is that you live in, things like that. And so I would say like basics from an SEO standpoint would be, which obviously, first of all, hire someone who's excellent at SEO to do it. Don't try to do it. But basics of just like setting yourself up for success is, of the services you provide, make sure you have a page on your website for each one. Like just even if it's nothing else that you're doing, if you do drywall, make sure you have a page on your website that's all about drywall in Springfield, Missouri, or the location that you're in. So that way Google can be like, well, what does this business do? What, like, what's their skill set? Things like that. If you have one page that lists all of your services, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to like rank for that, because if you think about it, there's other sites that have 15 pages about drywall if they only do drywall, things like that. And so it's like, it is kind of a numbers game. It's also the value of the content, and the like what words you are saying.
And you're talking about location too, because if Google is looking, or whatever search engine Bing is looking at that as a specific part of the algorithm.
Yeah, exactly.
If they see somebody says drywall contractors, well, you're not looking for San Francisco if you're in New York.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I want somebody local, so they're going to rank that higher. So
Exactly.
you have a computer figuring out, or trying to figure out what it is you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess if we're talking about it Congenius wise, right? Obviously, we have estimating software for contractors. We have feature pages that are specific, so that way if someone is looking for a digital takeoff tool, they will have a better chance of finding our digital takeoff website page. If they're looking for proposal builder software, they will have a better chance of finding our proposal builder page, so that it's specific to what they're looking for, because people search things very specific. If you put yourself in the buyer's seat here, of like, if I'm looking for someone who does drywall, I don't want to go to a painter, unless they do drywall too. But you know what I'm saying? So same thing with like every industry, like Congenius, same thing. Takeoff software, estimating software, those kinds of things we want to have relevant pages, so that way there's a page specific to what you're looking for, that speaks specifically to what it is.
And if you're overwhelmed by the content side of that, of just being like, okay, talking about your service, really just kind of back into that from an angle of, well, if I wanted to tell somebody about what it is that we do and how we do it in our process, you just start writing that down, and just, and somebody else can edit it. Like, don't worry about spelling and grammar and all the rest. If that's a challenge, you just start, penciling in thoughts of being like, okay, I want to explain to us like what sets us apart. If you're a drywall contractor, running with that example of just being like, well, we're really great at plasters and repair, and, plastering and repair. And, we can make a wall look flat. And you can talk about your process and how you do that, or we're fast or efficient, or whatever those things are. You can talk about it, and I think that gives you a lot of content.
Yeah.
And then when you do go to that agency who doesn't know what it is that you do, you have something to tell them and saying, here's what I'm thinking.
Yes.
And they can edit it. They can, but you give them something to start with, and then they can give you a better idea on the quote, so you're not doing the change order stuff later.
Which, that's a really good point, because it's like, no agency is an expert in what you're doing. Don't expect an agency to write like you would, because again, they're trying to be experts for a lot of people, and they're doing research, and they're doing, they're doing the best they can. I'm not saying that, but they don't have the experience you do, and even in the example you gave of like plaster repair, like, I'm thinking of that, of like, well, that might even deserve a page on your website if you're really great at that. Yeah. Because it's like, if I'm like, oh, I'm a homeowner, I need plaster repair. I'm like, plaster repair contractor. I'm not going to look for drywall contractor potentially. Point. You know what I mean? If I know what it is, specifically. So it's just a really good example of like, hey, figure out what people are looking for when they're actually trying to find you, or what what are the services that you do the most of, and then like write pages based on that.
And break it down for the specifics to each area. If you're a window contractor, you can say, well, if it's new installs and replacement windows and window upgrades, repairs, those kinds of things. I'm like, whatever service you provide, break it down into some detail. That gives the search engine more. So, okay, so search engine ranking, that's going to really, I mean, we're packing a lot in here, but we're trying to give you guys a kind of a roadmap. in the sense of like, we're not trying to give you, we're not the agency that's helping you through this, but nonetheless, give you some tools to help navigate through this.
For sure.
So now the search engine optimization side, now you mentioned other things, and now we can talk about like social media. Some maybe we can just touch on that because it is a big deal, like a social media presence. And I mean, from the guys that I follow that I think are the ones that are really ones you actually want to engage with. Before and after photos are fun. Being able to like have personality and brand, not just talking about like, we're the best contractor in Springfield, is kind of very empty. Like, is it what you think you are? Or I mean, like, instead of like making, and that's the temptation for anybody that's like running your social media, is for them to just throw out empty things. But get them on your job site, have them take a couple of photos, take a quote from you guys, or talk about an event that happened. Like, those are the things that people are actually curious about.
For sure. Yeah. It's interesting, as you were kind of talking about that stuff, I was thinking too, like really the marketing context for a remodeler and a home builder is a lot different than a trade contractor.
Yes.
And in the sense of like branding yourself, marketing yourself, those kinds of things. Because I think for trades specifically, like a lot of trades, it's like, oh, an issue that I'm having makes me think I need a trade. Like I have a plumbing issue. I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to search for a plumber in Springfield, Missouri, because I need a specific thing solved within a certain period of time. Remodeling and home building, it's a much longer buying cycle, And so from a branding and a marketing standpoint, I think like social media, obviously referral, those kinds of things from a remodeler context probably like make a lot of sense of like being in front of the right audience. We're targeting people specific to like who your ideal customer is, what's their income, their household income. You can target those things on social media.
If you're doing paid advertising.
If you're doing paid advertising. And so I think that's something just to be aware of on the remodeler and the home builder side of things, of like showing your work, showing examples of that. It's probably a longer buying cycle on the remodeling and home building side. Whereas trade specific, I'm like, well, I have a roof issue. Like I want to show up on Google the first time when someone's looking for a roofing contractor in Springfield, Missouri, for example.
Repair, replacement, hail damage. I mean, there's things like that of issues. But yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And really in the general contracting space, there's more reviews, there's more before and afters, there's more personality attached to you as the person they want to work with.
For sure.
Like, do we want this guy? Outside of even doing great work, do we want this guy? Do we want him in our house?
Yeah.
Is a big part of it as well. So the big part of who are you?
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it as well. So being authentic with your story, even on your website, is really fun.
Yeah. So I think kind of like tying back into that too, like, I don't know that like if you're a general contractor or a remodeler, I'm not sure that spending money on like Google ads, which is like, if you did a Google search, it's the 4 placements that you see at the top before the organic listings is what that's called. And so I don't know that that's necessarily the best place to spend your dollars. Up front, but if you're a trade contractor, I would highlight fence contractor, like roofing contractor, drywall contractor, like people are looking for a specific thing that you provide, then I would probably recommend Google advertising or like paid ads on Google.
We're packing a lot in here.
I know.
One last thing we're trying to get. I know. No, this is awesome. No, I love it. I wasn't trying to cut you off. But one last thing though, a lot of times you're going to get phone calls from Angie's List, from House, not from House, the other one, Service Magic. Now they're dominating the space now, but then they change into something else. But Home Advisor.
Yes.
Yeah. So you get these guys out there that promise you leads. They promise you quick solutions to marketing. Like you need work, and they say, we have lots of work for you. Run. Like, I mean, it's the general idea from these guys, but essentially they're the bottom feeders in the industry. And I think, not to really give these guys a terrible rap in this, but essentially just to break down how it works.
Yeah.
They are paying for position in Google and search engines for anybody looking for a specific service. So they're going to,
they're doing exactly what we're telling you to do.
Exactly. They're doing that. They're ranking well, and they're going to their website. And a lot of it's around like, how much should something cost? And that's where I have a problem with it, because they say, how much should tile cost? Well, the first result you're going to see is Home Advisor saying how much something should cost. And you cheapen things down to like a price point. And then they're basically just dumping in 4 or 5 people that are curious on how much something costs at your doorstep. They're not necessarily ready to buy. Now, it is a way of getting quick leads.
Yeah.
But if your long-term play is really trying to build a personality, a brand, and having like that local connection, like it's a shortcut that maybe you might work, but you pay, $50, $100, and you have a whole nother thing to manage. And if you're, it could work.
Yeah.
But it's a challenging way to build a business.
Well, and I think the way they're doing it too is like multiple contractors are getting the same lead.
Yes.
And so it's like, if you are paying for that service, you better call them within the first 5 minutes that you hear from them. You know what I mean? So that you actually have a chance to win them, because they're going to get ambushed by 4 contractors the moment they fill out that form on Angie or on Home Advisor or things like that. So those are things just to be aware of. Like, I know people that have had success with that, but it's also probably the people who are looking for the cheapest work, to your point of,
They're looking for a volume-based business, more or less. They look at lots of leads, lots of customers. They have the capacity to deal with. I don't know if there's too many guys in our audience that actually have that type of business model, though. You know what I mean? Like, if your business is a niche business where you're doing, a specific type of thing, or you have something that sets you apart from the other people, you might have a better chance at communicating what that is outside of that context of a lead service.
True.
So if you do use a lead service, though, you brought up calling immediately.
Call them quickly.
Yeah, you need to be the first guy there, which seems counterintuitive. You might pause leads when you're not, like, if you're not on a week, if you're not going to call somebody back on a weekend, don't pay for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the first come first to, basically has a chance at it, because the 5th one in, they're like, oh, I already have somebody at that point.
For sure.
The danger with the lead service is you end up getting a lot of volume of work and not necessarily the right customers.
Right.
So you're not you don't have a control over who you're marketing to.
For sure.
That agent or that service does.
Right.
And they're just going to throw stuff at you. Their job is to make money, which it should be. I mean, like they're offering you a service. Exactly. They're trying to make money, so they're just going to dump as many people off as they can.
Yeah, for sure.
I've used it in contracting. I've played around with it. And at the end of the day, we did better when we did our own marketing. Yeah.
So we'd advise that. I know this was a lot. This was like fire hose of marketing consulting.
Yeah.
And,
so if we were to recap it, what would be your recap of it, Kinsey?
Yeah, I think recap is just like do one thing excellent at a time. It's like things we've talked about previously. It's like you don't have to pay $5,000 a month to an agency to do everything. Like, I think you can test certain things. There's a lot of things that you can do just on your own organically. Like, and when I say organic, I mean like not putting dollars behind it. There's a lot of inexpensive things to do. So, getting a logo, get a brand going. Like, I think it's like a workflow in my mind of like, hey, start there, start at the beginning, get a truck wrap. Like, you don't have to be paying monthly recurring expenses for those kinds of things. Those are like one-off project based. Start getting some great photos for projects. Like, again, those are not like recurring expenses that you're having to pay every single month. It's just project based. So that'd be where I'd start. And then obviously building a social media channel is free too. You can have a free business page, things like that. So before you get a website, get a free Facebook page or Instagram page or things like that. Start sharing your work for more referrals and things like that. And then start with a website, hire people who are great at what they're doing, which is why I'm hiring contractors that are listening to this versus, my neighbor.
Yes.
So I think that would be the recap is there's people that are skilled in a certain area, vet them, see their references, see their portfolio before you say yes to them or hiring a relative who's does it on the side. Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, and I think for the payoff in all of this is to be able to have a business that can scale, can grow, and that brand is worth something.
Sure.
And it's going to help. It's going to really carry you through times when you have more certainty. You have the more you invest in your brand, the more certainty you have. They say, well, times are good. Times are good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work right now.
Yeah.
But you want to future-proof your business.
Sure.
And you want to be able to be prepared for anything. And I think that big part of that is having a brand, because not to be fear-mongering, but in a contraction of any kind, the first people to go are the people, the least relevant players in it. And I think you want to make sure that your business is highly relevant in the conversation.
Yeah.
And not overselling yourself too.
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of it too. Like, take on what you can. I like what you said about this is a workflow. It's a journey. You start off at the beginning, and some guys are way past that. Some guys are at the beginning.
For sure.
And it's like, really just not being overwhelmed by it. You don't have to have all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Start off one great thing, one complete process at a time.
Yeah. And then one last thing that just came to my mind whenever you were sharing that is, if you're getting a lot of calls and it's like work that you're having to turn down, track that. Because if it does contract and you're like, well, I'm actually low on time, like those are like really quick calls of like, hey, we had some schedule openings in 3 months, 4 months, whatever that may be. We had a few openings. I know you called us 5 months ago. They may not have gone with somebody else. They may have just waited. And so it really gives you like a follow-up strategy.
Yeah.
if you do have some openings,
Yeah.
if you're tracking it, you've
Yeah.
got to track those people, make sure you know who those people are, and you can follow up with them if you do have openings, with some of the people that you've missed. So,
and guys, you need a job board. You need some sort of CRM.
True.
You need Congenius. You need something like that to keep track of all of your projects and where they're at.
Yep.
If you go this direction, if you have marketing, otherwise you get lost in all of it. You don't have good follow through with people. You get a bad name because you're not following up with people that are interested in your services. It's better to tell somebody no. Thanks for contacting us. We just don't have availability right now than just not ever following through and really staying in touch with them. So
it's true.
That would be, I think that's the wrap for today.
Yeah.
Hopefully these are useful thoughts. We can dive into more specifics, but I think one of the things that came out of just the conversations we've been having lately with people that we serve is, the specifics matter in all of this too. So we want to lean into some of this today.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helpful. Helps. Love to some feedback. Love to hear your guys' hacks and where you're at with things as well on, what tools have you discovered that work?
For sure. It's good. Catch you later.
See you guys.